Okay. Some of the things that we kind of skipped over, I talked about rebar or re-rod. This is just a little short chunk of it. This looks like 1/2 inch to me. But like I said, this is normal in 20-foot sections. This stuff, you can grab a hold of it and bend it to what you need. If you had to cut it, you'd have to use a hacksaw or a sawzall with a metal blade, or there's a special saw, the same saw that you can cut concrete with, but it's a different blade that goes in it, or a little right angle grinder, which we do have some of them in there. You could cut it real quick with that, what lengths you needed. This is one way of strengthening concrete because it ties it together. Another way is called wire mesh. This particular kind, I think they're like 8 or 10 foot long sections. They come in by 5 foot wide or something. Of course, you might have to cut this to size. That's why I have the bolt cutters over there. Can you hold them up so the camera can see them? Okay, bolt cutters work really good to cut that stuff. You just nip along where you want it. You can also buy this stuff in a roll, a little harder to work with. Can you see how nasty this looks? Yeah. Rusty. This is the way it comes to you. It isn't because this is old. So this stuff's really dangerous, and it seems like it never fails. You're moving this stuff around and then you get stuck with it or get a big old scrape from it on your arm or leg. Tetanus and tetanus shots are critical. I mean, if you're working around that stuff, any kind of remodeling with old rusty nails, we want to think about that kind of stuff. I think it should be a requirement in this class for everybody to have a current, what's it called, tetanus shot. I think they should let me give them.
No, I.
That would be great. Have anybody ever had a tetanus shot? They hurt. Every time I get one, my arm all bruises up. They usually give them to you right back here, but it all bruised up. It looks like I got hit with a softball.
You tell me this, and I have to get this year. Thank you.
Yeah, they stink. I don't like them. And then they hurt for about 2 weeks. Mine always do anyway. Anyway, so we have this, another way you can buy this wire mesh. It's a little bit thinner, but it comes in a roll, and it's 3 foot wide. That stuff's really dangerous because when you roll it out, what do you think that roll is trying to do? Because it's metal, spring right back where it was, so it's trying to roll up on you. So normally what you do is you have one guy stand on the end of it, and hopefully you don't get off it on you. You roll it out, measure what you need, you nip it with those bolt cutters, and then usually to handle it, to move it into where you're going to put it in your concrete, you turn it upside down because then it's not trying to roll up so bad on you. But yeah, but when you flip it, it's wanting to stab you and scratch you, and so. So the way this stuff works normally is they make little stands. You could make up stands, put pieces of brick underneath it. But where would you want this in your concrete?
The middle?
The middle, preferably. But if you're out there walking in it, okay, you're pushing it down. So every now and then, and even some of those come-alongs have a little hook welded on them. You can reach down with that come-along after you're done walking in that area and pull it up. I mean, you do your best to keep it up. I've busted a lot of concrete up, and a lot of times this sits right on the bottom, which is doing not much good.
Then put it down, then put another layer on top.
Depending on the thickness of the concrete. Like I poured machine bases at, it used to be the Chevy plant in Adrian here, used to be Fisher Body. And we poured pads for machines in there that were 8 foot deep. That was scary walking out in that. But yeah, that was kind of done in layers, but not letting it harden. It all had to be one piece of concrete. But anyway, with that, that stuff tends to go to the bottom. I don't prefer it, I guess, because of that. This stuff, you can do it a couple different ways. You can have it in there, pulling it up in the concrete. Usually once you get concrete underneath this, it's a little harder for it to get pushed down because the concrete kind of helps hold it up a little bit better than the wire. There's one more way that you can strengthen concrete up by something that you add in there, and it's this stuff right here. It's called fiber mesh, and you get this from the concrete company. Usually they'll put it in for you once they show up on the job. They'll be mixing the mixer around on the truck, and they'll go up there and dump so many bags of this in there compared to, and all it is little fibers, fiberglass fibers, okay? There's a couple different grades of this. This is just a residential grade. They do have a commercial grade. It's a little bit longer hairs, and I think it's a little bit bigger around. But it's weird. You wouldn't think that would do much. But that actually, once they mix that up, it spreads out in that concrete, and it's going every direction in there, and then that concrete's adhering to that everywhere, and it does actually work really good. And it's a great idea for especially outside pours to have that stuff put in there. And it don't cost you much more a yard to do that. So that's the 3 methods of strengthening it up, other than ordering your concrete with more bag mix of cement. It's wire mesh, fiber mesh, or rebar or re-rod. Talking about stakes, I mean, you can make up wood stakes. Like I said, usually you want little thin ones like this out there for your grade stakes, that the ones that you got to pound down in the concrete, because pounds down a little bit easier to get rid of. You can use wood stakes, make your own up. I brought one of mine in, but I don't know what I done with it. It must still be in the back of my truck. I have flat ones, just a little bit different design, but these metal ones are real nice. Mine are metal too. But they have holes in there to pound nails or run a screw in to hold your form to height what you want. So steel are a lot better. Of course, they're more money. Same thing, I said we had some tools over here. So in your project, you are going to have to cut a joint in it with one of these. I do have edgers. I did have a different edger over here. This really rounds it over really big. You guys probably shouldn't use that on your project. But there that is. Couple more things I want to go over that I kind of skipped. So Austin, can you grab me a hammer out of there? And then we're going to move that camera back over there. Yeah, I don't care what kind of hammer it is, that's fine. I guess if you can just kind of keep that steady and carry it over, that would be great. So I don't have to cut the video off again. We'll go over this again with your project, because I'm going to have you do this on your project. This is, say this was for a driveway. You're not really going to see the edge of your concrete much, because you're going to bring grade up fairly close to the top of it, correct? But say you were pouring like a porch cap or something, you would want this concrete underneath this board to look pretty nice, okay? So one way that you want to do that, the first thing you want to do, once you get your concrete poured in there, you want to go along with a hammer and you tap on that. Of course, your form would be a lot more stable because it'd have stakes in it. But you tap all the way along that. And what that does, it helps that settle out, fills them air bubbles, and makes the concrete more solid there. So you'll have to do that on your project. Then again, you would want to remove this when the concrete was still wet. Normally, like for a driveway, you come back the next day or something and remove it. So it's not going to tend to break on you. But on a project that had to have a nice finished whole edge, you got to remove that to trowel that edge too before it's all the way completely dry. So normally you'd put that together with screws so it comes across easy. You're not pulling around on it with a hammer or a crowbar. You know, you'd want to make the stuff easy to remove, and then you could remove that and finish that edge while it was still halfway wet. Curing process is the last thing I guess I want to talk about. Does anybody remember what the curing, when they're talking about curing, what that is?
Was there sprayed water on top of it?
Kind of, yes. It's the drying process. The slower you can concrete dries, the stronger and better concrete it is. Like pouring in the fall, you usually get a lot better concrete because it dries really slow. It's not hot out, the sun's not beating down on it. This dries better. And they talked about grade. I mean, you get grade, sometimes you got to put fill in there. Sand or pea stone is used for fill underneath concrete. That has to be compacted because you wouldn't want it to settle out just like topsoil and the grass rotten. It would shrink and then you'd have voids underneath your concrete. So you got to compact that. That water also helps compact. But plus, if you sprayed that down with water before you poured, that would slow that curing process down you know, where you would have better concrete. Then you've seen after it got so hard, he was spraying it with water on top. Some people take them fan sprinklers and put out there after it's hardened where that's not going to damage it. And they'll just let that sprinkle on it to slow that curing process down. Actually, concrete takes a long, long time. This constantly keeps getting harder and harder and harder as years go by. I mean, it doesn't stop. It's still curing slowly, a lot slower then. But that initial curing process, if you can slow that down, you have a lot better concrete. So I think that's, oh, one more thing I did forget. I wanted to talk about slump. Do you guys remember what slump was? How, yeah, mushy, or how much water's in it. Okay, commercial stuff's really picky. They'll use these test pods, and when you pour concrete, say you were pouring this floor in this is commercial. Every concrete truck that came to deliver to this would have to pour a test pod, and that has to get sent in. And if that don't meet the right strength for concrete, you have to bust that floor right back out. The state will make it bust right back out and pour it again, okay? Water has a lot to do with it. The amount of cement does also. It has to be a certain bag mix to meet a certain strength, but also the amount of water that you put in it. It's really easy to work with concrete if you get it really wet, but it doesn't have the strength. You got to be really careful on the amount of water you put in it, because if you put too much, it's going to be weak concrete. And commercial's really picky about that. They'll make you re-pour it, and everything has to get tested. So I guess that's all I wanted to talk about.